Hello, this is the second half of the recording for lecture 8 of Figma Decal, and we're going to talk a little bit about some more animation principles and a bit about renaming your layers. So I mentioned this earlier, but the idea that I've been saying over and over again of renaming your layers is really, really, really important in Smart Animate. And this is kind of just like a little hack that we figured out, not a hack, it's like a hidden feature in Figma that we wanted to share and make sure that everybody is aware of. So again, Smart Anime didn't, Figma didn't put a lot of emphasis on needing to rename your layers very well until Smart Anime was implemented. But because it's so important here, it's even more important for you to pay attention to your layer names, but there's a very easy way to do this in Figma with a lot of power. So there's actually something called the rename layer modal, where if you select multiple layers and then do Control or Command R, you can rename all of them at once. Has anyone like come across this before already? Okay, no, that is great. So this is a really quick way to name a lot of things really easily. So what you can do here is basically select a bunch of things. This is actually how we rename all of our slides as well. If I were to take all of these slides here and then do Control R, this modal shows up, and then I'm able to rename them all to something that I want. So we can name these slide whatever, or I can actually have it say slide and then the numbers increasing. I can have the numbers decreasing. I can have the numbers be as long as I really need them to be. I can have them in whatever order. And then I could actually also do the current name and then add some information at the end. So that means it'll keep whatever the current name of the slide is. And then I can add like new version. And the last kind of superpower here is that I can match things. So these are all right now r slash. So I can actually say instead of r slash, I want these to be saying slide. So that'll actually modify that for me as well here. So once I select whatever it is that I need here, it'll do that. If you're familiar with like in computer science, the idea of regex or regular expressions, I think Figma also lets you use all of that here. It doesn't indicate all of those immediately, but it's pretty flexible. So if you want to do some really complicated renaming scheme, you can do that there. The gist of this is that if you have two things in your Smart Animate stuff that you need to rename at the same time, let's say all three of these need to be renamed to be the same thing. I can select them all at once, call them whatever it is. So I call these like element, name, and they'll be quickly renamed. So just keep that in mind as you're working. Don't spend 2 hours renaming everything individually because you'll probably make typos and it's not a good use of your time. So just make sure that you leverage this. Then you can also actually see what layers are already matching if you're in the prototype tab. So you might have seen this as I was going through here. When I hover or click on this, every single other object that's named navbar, as you see in the left side, is also highlighted. So that means I know exactly what Figma thinks is related to each other, so I don't have to do all that guesswork. All of these are also the same name. These are all called, my goodness, something. Oh, it's hidden by my header. These are all called BSC for Berkeley Social Club. I can see this one, this one, this one, this one, this one are all already highlighted. If I were to rename this one by itself to something else, clicking on this is not going to highlight the other ones, even though they are all the same component. All their properties are exactly the same, but their names are different. So Figma doesn't recognize them as being the same thing. Cool. Any other questions about renaming things? Pretty straightforward. We just want to make sure that everybody's aware of it. Cool. All right. So the last thing that we're going to talk about today, and then because we have a little bit extra time, I'm going to trap you guys here and talk a bit about some other features that I think are really interesting, is animation in UX. We've talked about this a little bit already in the context of like squash and stretch and distortion and keyframes. But this is a little bit more of applying those concepts specifically to user experience and figuring out why is it so important that these animations are done intentionally. So these are 12 principles of UX in motion. So these are things that you can think about. Transformation, this reflects very nicely in Smart Anime, the idea of something changing from one form to another. You want it to look the way that your brain thinks it's going to look. If you have something like a camera movement, if you're thinking about UX in terms of like, what if this was like a film? What is the idea of the camera actually moving? This is, you can see something is zooming in, even though what's actually happening here is probably that this rectangle in the middle is just getting bigger. The animation effect is that you're zooming into the screen there, right? So animation should be functional and serve a purpose to the user and not distract them. These all feel very smooth. I know it feels very busy right now because we're looking at 12 of them at the same time. But functional animation helps to reinforce the hierarchy your understanding of something, and the user's kind of perception of what it is that they're actually using. So animation, for the most part, in your UX design should feel natural. There's obviously cases where this might not be what you want if you're doing this like an art piece, if you're making something that needs to feel urgent or particularly jarring, then you might not want them to feel like natural movement. But for the most part, you do want them to feel natural. This is the idea of the easing curve that we talked about, where you can see that this circle moves down, moves up, and then moves back down. So it has a kind of bounciness to it. You can see this happens because this line goes underneath the graph and it goes a little bit over the graph, the starting points. And then the time is indicating the speed of things. So it moves at first a bit slowly, then it moves quite quickly for the entire middle section, then it moves slowly again as you see the time passes. This is very similar to the idea of squash and stretch in animation. The idea of squash and stretch is that there are moments in time where something needs to be stretched out. Like say when this ball is moving quickly, the ball is actually physically longer in the drawing. And then when it's hitting the bottom, there's a moment of pause. Because there's that tangibility of the ball hitting the ground, it's going to squash down. So it actually gets flatter as it hits that impact point, and then it kind of stretches back out. So squash and stretch is what makes animation look smooth, even though it might not be what you intuitively think it's going to look like. If I were told like my first day out here, my first day in this class, to animate a ball, I would probably draw the same ball over and over again as a perfect circle, but then it would kind of look like if my hand was doing like this, which doesn't feel like a ball bouncing. If I wanted to mimic a ball bouncing, I'd do this. But you can see there's a change in speed as my hand is moving. So some cases of like this actually in like say mobile design in context are these are some examples of why that animation is so important. So in this particular example, we're talking about the context of something. A good way to indicate that an action has been performed is to use animation. So in this example, there's new posts appearing, but because they just pop in, you can't actually tell anything is happening. If these images say were the same, if it's somebody retweeting something, you might not actually notice that there's a new piece of content. Whereas on the right side, a good example is having things slide in. And by having it slide in, you actually see that that's actually visibly happening in the screen itself. So this gives a little bit more context. It gives a little bit of feeling to the, I guess, feed layout that you have in this particular app. Case two is subtlety. There's some things where less is more, and a lot of that is in UX animation. If you notice it too much, it is probably a problem because you're distracting the user. You want it to be animated in a way that feels normal, but that also doesn't detract from what's going on. So in this example, this is kind of exaggerated, but everything is flying in from different sides of the screen. That's distracting. I don't know where things are coming from. I don't know what the left and the right sides of the screen mean. Whereas on the right side, we actually have everything coming in from the bottom when it loops. So all of these cards are coming in from the bottom. Another reason why it coming up specifically from the bottom is helpful is because this is designed to be something like an infinite scroll. If everything was coming in from the right side, I would think about what is the physicality of that? What is tangibly on the right or left side of my screen? But if it's coming from the bottom, I know that as I keep scrolling down, as I see where it's coming from, I'm just going to see more posts. So it reinforces the idea of infinite scroll. And then case three here is the orientation. So I usually use this example as like, if you were doing that kind of physical prototyping that we had in one of the videos or one of the readings a few weeks ago, where would the pieces of paper come from, right? If I was showing this to you on a desk with actual pieces of paper for all of the screens, which direction would I be moving everything? Defying those expectations can be really, really jarring and confusing. And so you want to make sure that you adhere to those. In this left example, they're not adhering to it. This comes up from the bottom and then slides out to the left. And then if it comes back up from the bottom, you're confused about how did it get from there to there. It feels a little bit wrong. Whereas in the good example, when it loops back over, we're going to see that it's going to and from the same place. So here it's coming from the right side, and when we go back, it goes back to the right side. And we actually see this piece of smart animated, this little alien icon becomes the larger one that's right here. And then it goes back when you put it back. This is also kind of guided by the fact that you have a right arrow telling you that, hey, I'm pointing this way to tell you all of the content that you're trying to get to is over here. And then when we want to go back, we're going all the way back this way. One example of this that I showed in like a workshop I did recently is Spotify. So if you're familiar with Spotify, when you click at that bar at the bottom to what you're currently listening to, it slides in from the bottom. And if you're trying to put it away to go back to your playlist, you'll have it slide down from the top. If I have those sliding in different directions, the mental model of what you're looking at gets really confusing, and it becomes a distraction to whoever the user is. So yeah, the idea of orientation, I think, is most important as we're thinking through smart animate. So animations should also be part of your prototyping process. This is especially important if you're trying to create a good user experience. If you're interested in the UX part of UI/UX more, I would highly recommend this. As you're actually doing your low fidelity work and mid fidelity work, think about what the animations are going to be. How is it going to move? I don't just kind of instantly get from point A to point B. There's cases where that is the case. But if it's not the case, what is going to happen? What's going to change? Leaving notes about this as you're doing your low fidelity and mid fidelity can be really helpful. Figma makes it quite easy to do these animations very quickly as you're doing your low fidelity as well. So do keep all of this in mind as you're going. So any questions about any of that so far? Cool. All right, so we're almost done. I wanted to share a little bit more about that this deck that I showed earlier, just kind of showing now that we understand how Smart Anime works, the guts of this entire file. So this is a file that you can find on community. If you look up designing for Gen Z, it's made by somebody again on the Figma team. And so if we look into their file on how they did this beginning interaction, where if I click, these items slide in from the edges of the screen. And when I click again, they kind of slide into place. How did she make them slide in from the edge of the screen? This is something that I've like used as a hack myself as well. When you peel back the curtain and see what's actually going on here, you have this slide and this slide, right? They appear, but what's actually happening to get that movement is they're moving in from beyond the screen, right? So I've actually taken a copy of this. I'll just delete it and do it again. I've taken this. If we make a copy and then we actually expand it out, we can see that oh my goodness, there are actually these little stickers at the edges of the screen. We just can't see them because they've been cropped out. This means that when we go into this next slide, they're able to move into place very smoothly. So if I were to move this one, say, to the bottom, I guess that is not very clear here. If I were going to, oh my gosh, move, say, this one all the way to the left side, and then it's going to slide in from a different part. So if I then take this and I resume, I put it back to where it was, you're gonna see that this sticker that I had, it shoots in from the left side because I've moved where it came from. So this hack I think is actually very, very helpful for doing a lot of design work. Like for example, if you have a notification that's appearing from the top of a phone screen, if you want that notification to appear very smoothly, you can put it out of view. So it's clipped out of the frame, but it kind of comes in from the top. Yeah, so that's one of the kind of fun hacks that you can use in Smart Animate. And then again, the idea here, she's using rotation and position to move these stickers across the screen. So you can see here that this is 0% rotated, and then here it's like 57% rotated or 57-degree rotated. We can see that happen right here very smoothly. It's moving very nicely. All of these things are moving as well. And then one more note, just to dig this point home for the 1000th time, these are all called group 28. And so Figma is able to recognize them all as the same thing. Oh, okay. There's now videos and prototyping. Awesome. I'm able to kind of hold this, hover this, and I see all of the different things that are named the same. There's actually a bug in this prototype as well, where this red sticker here is not matching. And if you look carefully at this red sticker, it fades over. It's not actually doing the movement that it should be doing. So if we were to take this one and rename it to be the proper name, so that's group 30. Group 30, we can look into here. Maybe these are different. We can go ahead and just rename all of these to be red sticker. And then hopefully this should fix it. And now it moves slowly, very smoothly between these two frames. Yeah, so Smart Animate, that is that. I do want to talk about one more thing really quickly. Also go through these little examples that I made once. This was something that I actually just use in the slide deck. So one of the fun little benefits of doing slide decks in Figma is that you can add little animations like PowerPoint animations that are just like a little bit more fun. This is just 4 frames, but I made this like image of a violin being played, also just entirely with Smart Animate. I only have these 4 frames that just kind of loop through each other, where the bow is here, it's put over and then dragged down and then put back. Anyway, the one thing I want to talk about is that in this class, we don't talk about interactive components because they're a little bit out of scope, but interactive components are something that's going to actually make the design process way, way easier and smoother. So what that is if you have components in Figma and you have them as variants of each other, they're in the kind of same family, you can actually just have the prototyping happen in those components themselves. So I'll show an example of what that means. Let's make one component that's just a small rectangle. We can make it red. And then let's make a second one where it's rounded. So it becomes functionally a circle. Let's call these button. I'll rename these to button. And then let's make these a component set. So these are now part of the same family. They're both called button. The property here can be square, and the property here can be circle. Now I'm going to make a frame and put a button inside of it. What I want is that anytime I click on this button anywhere in my app, no matter where it is, I want it to turn into a circle. And then when it's a circle, I want to turn back into a square. So the main way that we would probably do this without interactive components is just to have these two frames and then prototype them together like this, or I guess it should come from the square itself, prototype these together this way. And then now I have these two items that turn into each other, right? So if I click on this, hello? Hello? Okay, that's awesome. That's very strange. I don't know where it went. Oh my gosh. Okay, that wasn't expected. We'll redo that. But the idea here is that I can actually prototype these two things together and tell them anytime you are clicked on any frame ever, do the thing I just told you to do. And so what's going to happen, ideally, if I didn't break this somehow, is that if I prototype this now, what the? I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. I do not understand why it would not show up on the frame. Hmm. This is all very strange. Okay. Awesome. It changes by itself now. This is a single frame. It doesn't go to anything, but because that interactive component is on top of it, this will always happen no matter what. It functionally does the same thing again of what I was trying to do earlier, where there are two frames and this one is this and blah, blah, blah. And these two things are prototyped to each other. But if I have 100 screens and all of them have this button on them, then I don't want to have to make a 200 screens and have them go through these two things. So interactive components let you set that kind of movement at the level of the components instead of at the level of the frame. Sorry, I don't know what happened earlier, but this is the gist of it. We can also go ahead and make this a smart animate so that it'll kind of smoothly turn it from a circle into a square this way. So now it's going to nicely do that. No matter where I put it, if I were to drag this over into like, for some reason, one of these screens, it'll do the same thing as well. So let's put this in here, and then let's watch this animation, which will be very strange, because it's not always there. But if I click on it fast enough, it'll change. Anyways, that's the gist of interactive components. If you want to learn more about it, I can share a little bit about it in Slack, or you can message me, or you can talk to your TA, or just look it up on Figma's help desk. But interactive components, once you're actually getting into like more complicated design work, are going to be your friend to make things a lot less complex. In the past, when we have taught this class and had people do like complex prototyping for the final, they would make like 100, 200 screens because there were just very minute changes that would happen. But if you're going to be able to implement interactive components very quickly, you're able to do a lot of that way faster. Anyway, I've been blabbering on about things that are off book now for a while, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. This week's homework is not due until we're back from spring break. So there is still like a week of class time to work on it. I don't want anyone to have to do any work over spring break. This is not necessarily longer than any of the other homeworks. Please enjoy your break. But this is due the Monday that we get back. It's a smart animate Pokédex. So we're taking all of the concepts that we did today. And then the theming around it is just Pokemon and like how do we learn about the Pokédex here. I've heard reviews that this is one of the more fun homework, so I hope you enjoy it. And we're going to be going a little bit more deeply into prototyping. And then the lab for this week is similar, just more practice. I'm getting to know all of this a little bit better with the example of like a smart home app. The secret word for today will be Gen Z because of the slide deck that we looked at here. So you can just make that two words, Gen, Gen space Z, the same way that it's in the deck. And the only other thing to think about for the future is that when we do get back from spring break, the next lecture is going to be illustration. We're going to talk about different kinds of composition properties, things like color theory, things like perspective. It's one of our, I would say, like longer, more complex lectures, but I think it's also one of my favorites. Erin McCann's going to be teaching it. I don't know if any of you know her from NOD and from this decal previously. But yeah, look forward to that. And then that's the third of our three kind of advanced techniques that we're talking about. We had auto layout, we had smart animate, and then we have illustration. We're going to also be introducing the final that week. The final is to propose whatever you want to do with some constraints that we're going to introduce that week. We can start ambiently thinking about if there's a personal project that you really want to tackle. Think about it. Feel free to message your TA or message me about it if you want to just get things cooking. And yeah, that is all for now. Please have a very restful break. I don't want anyone to have to do any work over break, and enjoy your time off. So yeah, that's all for today. Thank you.